capability. So getting more corporates on board and making sure that those corporates actually utilize the protocol and that we actually standardize this protocol. And right now we're really focused on getting more and more corporates involved. And we're already doing some really cool stuff, for example, with Bosch and with Volkswagen, with Energy, mainly focused on the mobility sector, but also on the energy sector, mission critical infrastructure, and so on and so forth. And so our vision of IOTA is truly to enable this machine economy where machines start transacting with each other, but the potential of IOTA goes far beyond just this machine economy. Because having a transactional settlement protocol where you can transfer value without any transaction fees, without any trusted third party, without any bank is truly groundbreaking. It can truly change something. And so IOTA can also be utilized, for example, for remittances or web payments if you want to, for example, tip your favorite artist, and so on and so forth. And right now we're really in the process of getting more adoption, getting more awareness. And I guess this is one of those kind of steps forward to actually build something groundbreaking. And yeah, so I guess that's the majority of my talk right now. I kind of want to get this fluid interaction going where people can just ask me questions. Because the main thing that I also want to discuss is this whole blockchain space. Because what I can tell you about being at the forefront of this blockchain space is that it can be difficult. Because everyone talks so much bullshit, everyone hypes, but nobody makes money. And the thing is, only the consultants make money right now. But if you truly want to build a business on top of a blockchain right now, nobody knows how to make money with it. And so we're still in the early stages of blockchain and obviously also of Tangle and so on and so forth. But we're slowly progressing away from this amateur hour towards more professional involvement of corporates and also of non-profit foundations and so on and so forth.
Can you talk maybe a little bit about the differentiation between
exactly
what you guys are doing and other protocols that
yeah.
are around? That would be very interesting.
Yeah, so I didn't want to make this. So, quick question, how many of you do not know what the blockchain is? Okay, so that's very good. So the main thing, obviously, the main reason why we created IOTA is because we realized that blockchains have this inherent bottleneck. So the biggest problem of blockchains is that they're not scalable, so you can only push a certain number of transactions through, and they have huge transaction fees. So as you might know, a few months ago in Bitcoin, you had to pay $1 to $8 to push your transaction through, to get it accepted. And that's just insane if you want to make it possible for one machine to pay another machine just for a kilowatt hour of charging, and so on and so forth. And so these inherent limitations are these limiting factors in the adoption. And so what IOTA is, it has two main different aspects to it. It's no longer based on a blockchain, because like I said, blockchain is a sequential chain where you limit the scalability of it. And IOTA, instead of using a blockchain, we use a Tangle. So the Tangle is this directed acyclic graph. So it's one transaction that it references two past transactions. So it's no longer based on blocks and it has no chain. And the way that the Tangle then works is that it's kind of this mesh that evolves. So one transaction attests that two past transactions are valid, and through that you start building up confirmations. So that is the first major difference. So it's no longer based on a blockchain, but it's based on a Tangle. And the second major difference of IOTA is our consensus approach. So consensus is the most important aspect of a blockchain protocol. Like, how do you achieve consensus that the transaction is valid or invalid? So in a blockchain, that's the miners. So the miners are there to say, hey, like, we create the blocks, we aggregate all the transactions in a block, we validate the block between each other, and then propagate it throughout the entire network. And the miners are obviously there to get a transaction fee, and they can also be the gatekeepers of the blockchain. Like if you know about what's happening in Bitcoin, all of the drama is really because the miners fight against the core developers. And obviously also the biggest problem of mining is that they waste so much electricity. So Bitcoin today utilizes a few $100 million just to secure this blockchain, this distributed ledger. And so we came along and said, like, hey, instead of wasting all of this electricity, like obviously we care about the environment, right? We don't want to waste that electricity, but instead we want to have a different approach to consensus. So the way that IOTA approaches consensus is that it's no longer decoupled from the transaction making process, but instead it's an inherent property of the protocol. So if you make a transaction in IOTA, you actually validate transactions. And because you're validating transaction, you're also contributing towards the security of the network. And because you're contributing towards the security of the network, you don't have to pay any transaction fees. So it's a very decentralized network where every participant has the same rights, the same rules, and everyone starts benefiting from participating in that sense.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What kind of use cases do you already have? You mentioned that you're already working with some corporates.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. So the question was what kind of use cases we work on right now. So the main use case that we work on right now are in mobility, making it possible for a car to have a wallet. And with that wallet, the car is able to pay for all of those value-added services. Like for example, for the parking station, or the EV charging station, or the toll station. So through that, the car kind of becomes this independent actor. Because now if a car has a wallet, with that wallet, it can not only pay for services, but it can also charge for services. So the car can now, for example, it can be leased out on demand. So now you have kind of a fleet sharing, a sharing fleet set up where cars start earning money and they start paying for those services. And through that, you get those independent actors out of it. So that's in the mobility space. And secondly, we also do a lot in energy. Basically making it possible for you to contribute and by selling your electricity. So there's this concept of neighborhood electricity. So let's say that you have a photovoltaic setup, and you want to be able to sell the electricity that you generate, because you have excess electricity, right? You only utilize a certain amount. So instead, what you want to be able to do is you want to be able to sell this electricity either to the grid operator or to your neighbors. And so through that, you really start creating this machine economy between households already. And secondly, our major focus is also really on security. So the beauty of IOTA is that it's the first protocol that you can utilize without any token. Like with any other blockchain protocol, you have to have a token in order to participate. But in IOTA, you don't need a token in order to participate. But instead, you can already use IOTA to secure data, for example. And with this concept of data integrity, like making data tamper-proof, because the entire network is obviously validating the data, they secure it, and it can no longer be changed, we can really start doing some really cool stuff. For example, what we're really focused on is the security of things. Because the Internet of Things is either going to be the biggest threat of humanity, or it's going to be the biggest potential. Obviously, we want to make it the biggest potential. And some of you probably have heard of some of the attacks that happened recently with IT, webcams being hacked and utilized to DDoS websites. Obviously, we want to prevent something like that from happening. And so what we are building now on top of IOTA is actually kind of a security of things protocol, where we utilize IOTA to secure the data of machines, to have this system integrity. And we're actually utilizing this protocol and this concept also for autonomous vehicles, because autonomous vehicles also have the same problem. Like if one of the ECUs, for example, gets hacked, you can start doing really crazy stuff with it, which is even life-threatening. So what you want to do is you want to utilize something like IOTA for the system and machine integrity of the entire car. Because now you can start validating that the car actually does what it's supposed to do, and not that an external threat, like a hacker, is able to intrude it and change some of the variables that you suddenly steer to the right and you make an accident or something like that. That's right now our main focus, but for example, we also work with some really cool companies, like for example, Refunite. So Refunite, they provide digital identities to refugees. And what we help with them is actually for digital identity, but also to provide internet access to those refugees. And most importantly, also make it possible for those refugees to pay their loved ones via remittances. Yeah.
So where are you on the development timeline? Are people using Tangle?
Right, so we've been working on IOTA since 2015. So right now we have a reference implementation that's already working and being utilized. We obviously don't call it production ready in that sense, but it's being used. And IOTA so far has enabled more than $1 billion of value to be transferred. So it's definitely being used, and right now our main focus is kind of to build an alliance out of IOTA, because we obviously want to get those corporates on the same table to start working on this open specification and this open standard of IOTA. So that's kind of our main focus right now. Yeah.
You stressed the importance of making money.
Yeah.
Can you say a few words on how you're planning to make money if you open source everything?
Right. So that's always one of those good questions. Like, how do we make money? Like, obviously we don't. We're in blockchain. Now, so the way that we made money is we had this ICO where we raised $500,000. And those $500,000 are now worth $900 million. And so when we started out with IOTA, we also came to the community and said, like, hey, if you want to have a foundation, if you want to have a dedicated team behind us, you have to donate funds, because else we can't continue with this. And the community, because it's kind of awesome community, they donated around 5% of the total supply of all IOTA tokens. And right now the foundation has this 5% of all IOTA tokens, which is about 40 million whatever dollars. And that is one source of funding, but obviously we also work on grants. So we already have a few grants that we got approved of from the German government, for example. And then what we also do is we are setting up this alliance, and this alliance is going to work similarly to the Linux Foundation, where we charge corporates a membership fee. And so through that we kind of have this long-term sustainability of the foundation. Yeah. Yeah. But another. I like to further add on that question, like how do we personally make money out of that? Obviously, like we are kind of altruistic in that sense of developing something, working 24/7, eating a lot of frozen pizza, not for nothing, because we have we have our own vision of where we want to be. But we realized early on, like I said, the foundational layer, the foundational protocol has to be free. It has to be open. Anyone can utilize it without any payment in return. But we, as entrepreneurs, can now start participating in this ecosystem, because having a ground layer that is being adopted, that is standardized, opens up so much more potential for startups to be created. And we as private individuals obviously also have ideas for startups that we want to create. But right now our main focus is really on IOTA. And so one point that I want to drive is, even though we have a lot of money and we have a high market cap, I don't think that we're successful yet. Like I still wake up every day and think like, fuck, like, so many problems. Where do I start? But it's still like it's work in progress, and I think that once we reach a point where we're confident that the foundation and the protocol is being utilized and it's kind of independent, doesn't need our carekeeping, then we will start building our own startups. But right now our exclusive focus is really on the foundation. Yeah.
So do you follow up? Can you say something about the importance of hardware development, and is that anything that you guys are having an eye on?
Right. So IOTA came out of a hardware startup, because obviously in order to achieve this vision of this Internet of Things, we need to have those dedicated computational base stations, like for fog computing. And so we are developing this dedicated hardware, and this dedicated hardware is also kind of a very good system for IOTA to be utilized in, because the dedicated hardware makes it possible to execute transactions faster, which now also means that we can achieve much higher transaction throughput and also adoption in that sense. And the hardware, the thing about blockchain is that people oftentimes only tell half of the story. So for example, if you input data into the blockchain, obviously it's immutable. But if the data is fast, you have this garbage in, garbage out principle. You have immutable garbage. And so that doesn't make any sense. So instead, you need to be able to have your protocol to be utilized and integrated into the hardware itself, because of trusted execution environments. So you can be sure that the data that the hardware generates is actually valid. And only then you can start interacting with the distributed ledger and the blockchain. Yeah.
And that is something that you do as well?
Yeah, we have a hardware startup. So the hardware startup was created in 2014. And it's still ongoing, and we'll have some prototypes ready soon. Yeah.
Is it based on PKI infrastructure? Basically, if you run your hardware node or transaction validation point, very new to your architecture.
Yeah, so what we developed is, so we do a lot of fancy stuff apart from IOTA. So the hardware that we created is no longer based on binary, but it's based on trinary. So I don't want to go into details about that, but obviously it's completely new hardware architecture, because our main argument is this Internet of Things is a completely new greenfield. There's no standards yet, there's no real world applications yet, because everyone is just like figuring out like where is IoT going. And so our argument is that in this Internet of Things realm, we can come into this space with a completely new protocol, which is IOTA, and become